Stay safe, reduce your contacts. Live from Waterford and Dungarvan, this is Waterford at 1.
Good afternoon, I'm Sinead. Aherne. In today's top stories, a Waterford TD is calling for full mandatory quarantine for everyone arriving into Ireland from abroad. 2 men have appeared in court charged over a drugs and cash seizure in County Waterford. While in sports, Chelsea are looking for a new manager after sacking Frank Lampard. People travelling into Ireland may face fines or imprisonment if they fail to isolate for 2 weeks under plans being considered by government. Passengers who arrive into the country without a negative PCR test will have to quarantine in a hotel for 2 weeks, likely at their own expense. Our political correspondent Sean Defoe reports.
The Cabinet Subcommittee on COVID will meet later today to discuss more strict rules on international travel. This will likely include mandatory 2-week quarantine for anyone arriving without a negative PCR test, or for anyone coming from Brazil, South Africa or other countries where there's concerns about new strains of the virus. For everyone else, they will be expected to isolate wherever they are staying as per current guidelines, but there's likely to be a clampdown with possible unannounced spot checks by Gardaí, who will have the power to fine or imprison people for breaches. Some exceptions are being looked at for people travelling back to Ireland on compassionate grounds. Contact with the governments in Belfast and London is ongoing about an all-island or 2-island quarantine solution, but both are in very early stages. The Cabinet Subcommittee is also likely to approve the extending of Level 5 restrictions by 4 weeks until the end of February. The reopening of schools will also be discussed, with Education Minister Norma Foley briefing government party leaders, though it's unlikely a decision on that will be taken today.
Sinn Féin's health spokesperson, Waterford's David Culnan, says mandatory isolation for people entering the country is long overdue.
Well, I would support mandatory quarantines, and if that means mandatory quarantine hotels, so be it. We have to do everything possible to limit the spread of the virus, and we have to listen very carefully to the public health advice. So the public health advice at the moment from NPHET is that we should remove discretion in relation to all of these measures, and they are very clear that they support mandatory quarantine.
Waterford Green Party TD Marco Kohosic says it's essential we continue to minimise our contacts. The 14-day incidence of COVID-19 in Waterford has fallen to its lowest level since the 7th of January. It's now 984 per 100,000 people after 50 new cases were confirmed in Waterford yesterday. Meanwhile, a record number of patients with COVID-19 were being treated at University Hospital Waterford last night. There were 127 cases on site. 7 were being treated in intensive care. Deputy O'Connell says our hospitals are into surge capacity at this point.
And so I'd really reiterate the public health advice. It's essential for us to really minimise our contacts, to cut down on all unnecessary travel. And if we do have to be out and about for employment or for the purposes of essential retail, for example, it's so important that we mask up, we adhere to those guidelines around social distancing, the hand washing. These are the practical steps we can take to help the absolutely outstanding work that's been undertaken by our GPs, by our nurses and our doctors inside the UHW.
The head of the HSE is hoping the testing of close contacts will resume this week. It was suspended on New Year's Eve due to huge pressure on the system, as Stephanie Rowan reports.
So far this January, over 94,000 COVID-19 cases have been announced. But the true figure could be much higher than that, as asymptomatic close contacts haven't been tested since the beginning of the month. On New Year's Eve, it was announced this was being suspended as the system was overwhelmed. However, that may change this week, with the CEO of the HSE, Paul Reid, saying the service will resume if the daily case numbers stay below 2,000.
Yeah, again, just to reassure listeners, we have always continued to test close contacts of outbreaks where we've had outbreaks, childcare facilities, healthcare workers, but we do want to get back to the wider community right now. Now, thankfully, we've seen yesterday again below 2,000. We're really anxious to do this.
It comes as the latest figures show there are 1,948 patients being treated in hospital for COVID-19 and 219 are in ICU.
2 men have appeared in court charged in connection with the seizure of drugs and cash in County Waterford. Gardaí found cocaine worth €90,000 when they searched 2 cars in Butlerstown on Friday afternoon. They also recovered €64,000 in cash. 2 men, aged in their 30s and 40s, appeared before a special sitting of Waterford District Court today. They've been remanded on bail to appear before the court again on the 23rd of March. 5 awards of over €9 million were paid by the State Claims Agency last year for medical negligence. The top 4 relate to cerebral palsy. The highest was nearly €23 million. The total amount paid out for medical negligence in 2020 was €245 million, along with nearly €70 million in legal fees. Solicitor Cian O'Carroll says the highest amounts are surprising.
It's quite shocking to see that 1/3 of the entire value of compensation paid in medical negligence cases last year related to just 5 cases. 1/3 accounted for by 5 cases. And that shows the really appalling degree of harm that is suffered.
Waterford continues to have the cleanest city centre in Ireland. It moved up 1 place to 8th in the latest Irish Business Against Litter survey. Ballybeg was in 22nd, deemed to be moderately littered. Kilkenny claimed top spot. IBAL spokesperson Conor Horgan says standards of cleanliness are slipping generally in towns and cities.
It's been a disappointing result. This latest survey shows that fewer than half of towns and cities are now clean. That's our worst result in 13 years. And if I bring you back only 3 years, we had 80% of our towns clean. So we've had a significant fallback. COVID is a factor.
Motorists are being advised to check Waterford Council's website to find out which roads have been gritted this winter. The issue of icy roads was raised at the Cumara meeting of councillors. Temperatures, meanwhile, dropped to as low as -5 in parts of Waterford this morning. The local authority's senior roads engineer, Gabriel Hines, says it's not possible to grit all roads, but the salted routes are published on the council's website.
I would be encouraging motorists to have a look at our winter service plan, see the routes that are salted, and you can expect those routes to be ice-free, and they should be using those routes ahead of using the shorter routes in travelling to work at a time when there's frost.
And primary school children in Waterford can brush up on their hurling and football skills at home with a series of new videos. Each is aimed at a different age group, starting with under 8 all the way to under 12, and will be shared on Waterford GAA's social media. Owen Morrissey's coaching officer with Dacia Oak Development, he says it's a great way for children to challenge themselves.
So we just launched under 8 one there over the last couple of days, and over the next week or two we'll be republishing and putting out other videos for under 10 and under 12. So, you might have a good 8-year-old out there that might say to themselves, right, I've completed these challenges and I might take on the under 10 challenges. Or if you have maybe an under 10, could just get warmed up by doing the under 8 ones. But instead, we hope to be launching these and putting these out there again over the course of next week and the next 2 weeks.
Make the smart play with Virgin Media. Check out their smart home packages at Virgin Media, George's Street, Waterford.
Sponsors of the sports news on WLR.
A very good afternoon from the sports desk. I'm Nigel Kelly. We are going to start with soccer, where Chelsea have sacked Frank Lampard. He leaves with the club down in 9th place in the Premier League, 5 points off the Champions League spots. Lampard took them to the top 4 in his first campaign in charge. And speaking after yesterday's 3-1 FA Cup 4th round win over Luton, he was optimistic that they would turn a corner.
The scrutiny on a club like Chelsea, it's normal, and the good thing for us to do is not to get too caught up in how many games have we won recently or where are we at in the table. When you're off it slightly, which we have been, the focus can only be on changing the form. And I thought the individual uplift in form and the collective uplift in form was a big positive.
Well, there's more FA Cup 4th round action tonight with Tottenham away to Championship side Wickham. Kick-off at Adams Park is at 7:45 and the winners will play Everton in the 3rd round. While Celtic says that the club is saddened to hear of the passing of their former player Johannes Evaldsson, aged 70. The former Iceland international was part of the Scottish Premiership team's double-winning side in 1977. He scored 38 goals in 195 appearances for Celtic and also had a 2-year spell with Motherwell. While Rangers have confirmed the signing of Scott Wright on a pre-contract agreement from Aberdeen. The Scotland Youth International is due to join the Scottish Premiership leaders in the summer. Meanwhile, Glenn Middleton has left Rangers to join St Johnstone on loan for the rest of the season. And now on to rugby, where Munster's Craig Casey and Ulster's Tom O'Toole are the only uncapped players named in the Ireland squad for the Six Nations. Head coach Andy Farrell has named a 36-man squad ahead of the opening game against Wales on the 7th of February. There's no place for Jacob Stockdale, who was unavailable for the trip to Cardiff due to a knee ligament injury, but Johnny Sexton, Ian Henderson, Ty Furlong, Peter O'Mahony and James Lowe are all selected, despite injury concerns. Former Leinster, Ireland and Lions prop Nick Popplewell says the return of Furlong is huge for the side, but a scrum is more than just a tight head prop.
He's just colossal. He's probably certainly first or second in the world at the moment, or certainly was before he got injured. But, you know, a scrum isn't one person. Without boring you to that, scrum is 8 people. Being in the front row, it's, you know, you need your back row pushing against you, and you need obviously your second row. So I think a lot of people kind of forget that, you know, the support from your back row players, the 2 wing forwards on props, is absolutely immense.
And finally, in the NFL, Tom Brady will play in a 10th Super Bowl after the Tampa Bay Buccaneers beat the Green Bay Packers to set up a showdown with reigning champions, the Kansas City Chiefs. Super Bowl 55 will take place in Tampa in 2 weeks' time, when Brady will be going for win number 7. Sports news on WLR is thanks to Virgin Media, Waterford.